Hello, guys. Welcome to the Milk and Cookies podcast, where we discuss serious topics over milk and cookies. I'm here with DeVaughn Clouser, who's going to be discussing private data, and I will be here discussing my topic, which is concerning national security as well, modifying the human body.
Thanks for having me, Riley.
All right, nice to see you, DeVaughn. First off, I saw in the news about this Cambridge Analytica scandal, and it seemed to relate to your topic pretty well. I'd like you to tell me about that.
Yeah, so basically in early 2018, the scandal actually broke, and it was actually by an ex-Cambridge Analytica. It's a consulting firm, so they help out political people win their races and stuff. And a whistleblower, so someone who left the company, actually exposed them for misuse of people's data, and it actually became very widespread. It became the first time that the public really took notice to trying to protect their personal data and push for a change in policy and stuff like that. So there was actually the 2018 breakthrough was actually in relation to the 2016 presidential election of Trump, but this wasn't their very first time actually doing something like this. It was actually shown that they greatly influenced the Brexit vote, and their interference was also in there was one or two Middle Eastern countries that had major politicians go through their consulting firm in order to do this. So basically, 87 million people had their data harvested.
Wow, that's a...
Yeah, so it actually started out originally as 30 million, then it went to 57 million before finally Facebook came out and said, it's 87 million. They actually sent messages to all these people and said, hey, your data could be out there. So a lot of the attention gets kind of drawn to President Trump's campaign, but I wouldn't say that this is really a political issue. It shouldn't be divided along party lines. I feel like this is important for everyone to get involved in. So basically what ended up happening was everyone took this quiz. They got sent out a quiz by someone from Cambridge University, and when they consented to it, all their data got consented to get released, and it also consented for their friends' data. So if just your friend Johnny decided to take this quiz that was going to tell him his psychological profile, well, looks like your data's gone too, and it's going right to help some politician that you don't want to be directly impacted by.
Wow, that's really interesting. But I'd like you to explain to me what exactly private data is and what exactly these guys are taking from us.
So when they took it, it was data about locations, their friends, what kind of stuff that they would like, what kind of stuff they were shopping for, all that kind of stuff that they were doing on Facebook. And it was actually used to figure out, they made profiles for each person and said hey, this kind of advertising is going to impact them well. This person doesn't seem like they'll be swayed by any kind of advertisement. They're strictly going to vote for Hillary or Bernie or whoever. Don't even send them an advertisement. Don't waste the money. Versus other people that was hey, this person may not seem very well educated. This person may seem like they're on the fence. Give them as much advertisements for Trump as you can possibly imagine. Give them anti-Hillary stuff, all that kind of stuff. So the personal data it's actually a very broad topic. Some people consider it to be anonymous data, so it's not attached to anyone. Some people are worried about if it's directly attached to one person. Other people don't even like if it's attached to a group, because that will allow for discrimination based on a group if it's attached to them. So it's very hard to determine what personal data is in our age, especially with the ever-changing amount of stuff like the Internet of Things, where devices such as your iPad, the Alexa, your refrigerator is recording data about you and how that can be used combined to make changes.
That's really scary, and I assume that other places outside of Cambridge Analytica and the political gain, they would have use for this data as well. Could you explain who also would have use for this data?
Well, one, social media websites are always collecting data. Technology websites, they collect data to improve their services and to sell to people to make money. It's surveillance capitalism, as I'll probably discuss later at some point because it's pretty core to the debate. The government, especially after the unfortunate events of September 11th, 2001, when after that the Patriot Act got passed, which allowed the government to spy and listen on the conversations and track internet data and stuff like that in order to help out national security. And also it affects just any individual. If for some reason you had a very rich person stalking you, then you could they could pay someone enough money to have some of your data handed over to them.
That is very, very concerning. Well, if it's already out there, I mean, why should I even be concerned with my privacy then?
Well, some of the people that are concerned about this debate are computer scientists. They are oftentimes looking because in the past, after the 90s, when there was a big phase where people were like supporting computer growth, they were joining computer fields. Now they kind of like after the 90s and the early 2000s, there was a few big scandals. It kind of looked like a shaky time for them. Stocks began to fall, and it's actually very similar now. Facebook stock began to fall after this. So basically, computer scientists that are just working the normal jobs in these companies are worried that this will become a slight fall in the industry, which obviously is not good for the computing industry as a whole.
So this doesn't even just the privacy data thing doesn't even just affect me. It affects the entire industry. That is very interesting. So what current policies and regulations are just stopping these companies? Because it seems like they just get to do whatever they want.
So right now in America, really the only major one is the Child Protection Rule, which states that people under the age of 13 are supposed to be especially protected from companies. So if a company looks like they're trying to like abuse children and get them to sell their data and stuff like that, then the government will take care of that and crack down on that. Outside of this, there's the General Data Protection Regulation of the EU, and they've actually been handing out major fines to companies with misuse, mishandling, not following their strict guidelines. So any country in the EU or selling to people in the EU are subject to these fines, and you can actually go online. We'll provide a link and some screenshots of it. You can actually see the list of stuff that they've been giving out, hundreds and thousands, millions of dollars worth of fines every week.
That is so. It's almost like just like a speed bump, like a speeding ticket for them. You know, it's just a small price to pay just steal people's data. That is really insane. What else can we do to stop them? I mean, this seems like it's not really stopping them currently at this point.
Yeah. So Herbert Lin, who was actually on Obama's cybersecurity national security for cybersecurity board and committee, he actually noticed that there's a common theme with human nature, and he relates it to how after 9/11 people became very, very worried about their national security, and that they were scared, so they passed laws that allowed their privacy to be available to anyone. They didn't want to stop anything because it could potentially help them. But now he notices that people are now realizing with the Freedom Acts being passed that kind of rolls back the Patriot Act, that people are become aware that their privacy is required, and he relates it very similarly to Pearl Harbor, when afterwards Japanese people got put into internment camps, which now is seen as an overreaction, which he's thinking that that's what's going to happen. So he thinks we kind of have to balance the cost of liberty with the pros to research, so people can research more freely and companies can have less regulation, and the national security versus the cost to our civil liberties like privacy and freedom of speech and stuff like that. Another one is the ethical debate, where people want international review boards, which oversee like university institutions, their kind of research. They want them to ethically make sure that universities and companies and stuff are handling this. However, Moshe Vardi, who is a computer science teacher at Rice University, he does not think that ethics is going to solve the issue at all. He thinks that we need legal policies to be implemented that'll stop it. He looks down at the automobile industry, how after the Model T became very popular, automobile crashes were at a all-time high, and every single year after that, they've become declining, even though the percent rate has been declining, even though cars are obviously being used more and more frequently. And he says that early in the day, companies didn't have any kind of stuff to worry about. They just kind of made whatever car they wanted, sold it however they wanted. But after regulation came in, that's when technology started improving, gas mileage started improving, all that kind of stuff, which we now take for granted in our cars because of policy. And it counters one of the main points for people that are against regulation online, is that policy stifles innovation, and this kind of disproves that point.
So, with that said, your main points is that we need to really not overreact. We need to balance our liberties with how much we're giving to the government. We need to look at it ethically as well, and think about the human aspect. And then also we need to think about, are we stifling our innovation? And your answer was no, if we were to pass more policies.
Yeah.
I think that's really great stopping point. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we will discuss modifying human body for military gain.
So, speaking of the possible national security implications of privacy online, Riley has actually recently been researching the possible implications of genetically and just modifying the human body in general in terms of warfare. So, it sounds very interesting. I mean, I've never actually like done any kind of digging into this myself. I've never seen any articles. So, what kind of like modifications are we looking at here?
Well, we're looking at some very interesting, somewhat outrageous things. Like, we have exoskeletons that can link with the human brain and move with us, giving us more strength, more speed, more endurance. We also have people trying to modify the flora of people's stomachs, allowing them to eat grass so that MREs and other types of supplies don't need to be shipped out to the soldiers, because grass is almost everywhere and it is a very plentiful resource. So they're trying to utilize that. Also, another outrageous one is gecko hands. And this allows the people to climb walls. And this is honestly what really drew me into this topic. And I don't think enough people are looking into this, you know?
Really, the gecko hands really got you. So, what exactly are like the safety concerns? What are we looking at? What's really bringing this towards your attention of what needs change?
Well, firstly, still speaking in the theoretical realm here, using a brain chip when someone doesn't sound safe, and we are actually not sure what kind of implications using a brain chip would have on people, and this obviously raises safety concerns because the unknown is very scary to some people. As well, I think we have past knowledge from the Gulf War, actually, from my source, Mr. Eftismos Paradosis. He researched that there was some sort of illness going around after the Gulf War in our soldiers that were deployed over there. And it turned out that between 175 to 250,000 members of enlisted members that saw combat in the Gulf War experienced some sort of sickness where they would see birth defects, brain damage, become paralyzed, lose motor skills and limbs. It was just terrible. It seemed to really impact people's lives after the war.
So that's obviously a large amount of people, especially that the Gulf War wasn't even comparable to like some of the larger wars, so there wasn't as many units involved, and that's still a large amount of people that were involved. So what exactly caused this illness?
Well, we're not sure exactly, but the theories point back to some sort of vaccine and some sort of preventive medicine that the U.S. government was giving our soldiers to try and stop the chemical agents that Saddam Hussein was using in that kind of warfare to take out our soldiers. So what this preventive medicine was trying to do was stop the effects of chemical gas attacks and prevent the effects from killing and trying to keep the soldiers alive. It also should be noted that these soldiers were active duty, and when compared to the ones in the reserves that did not see combat, there was really no effects happening to the reserve people, which the government denies that the reason that this is happening is because of the vaccine, but all signs really do point towards this preventative medicine.
Yeah, that sounds very unfortunate that they have to go through that, and the government is almost saying, no, you're wrong. It's not because of what we did. We were perfectly fine. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming that obviously the soldiers were all forced to take this. So what does the legal rights look for soldiers in these modifications?
Well, I mean, many people do know that as soon as you enlist in the military, you do lose lots of rights. You lose the right to bear arms. You lose the right of freedom. You lose the freedom of speech. You lose right of assembly. You lose many other constitutional rights that people would see as basic. And this does apply to the soldiers and their mandatory vaccines that they receive. Because according to the anti-vax movement, these vaccines are bad for people. But science has shown that it isn't. However, I do see that there may be complications in the future with people not wanting to receive the vaccines, but it is mandatory in service. And after you sign the paper, there's not much you can do to stop you from receiving these vaccines.
Okay, so other than the vaccines, what other kind of modifications are we looking at? Are there any currently happening in the military right now?
Oh, yes. the idea of a modification is very broad. Some people see dietary supplements as modifications because you're receiving your daily amount of proteins and other supplements that your body would require, and this causes excess. It might cause excess muscle growth in conjunction with exercise and other things that you participate in the military. Steroids are also very prevalent in the military due to the culture that surrounds the military and the thought that all soldiers have to be strong, have to be large, and they have to just have large muscle mass when compared to other people because they're fighting and they're doing physical activity.
So yeah, they feel like they have to be the stereotypical soldier.
Yes, it's very much a cultural thing that people are using these steroids.
So one thing that I actually noticed was you actually had mentioned something before about the LOAC. What exactly is that? I saw you.
Oh yes, the in my article I talked about how the law of armed conflict affects soldiers and people in combat. It says that you can't harm civilians, you can't harm prisoners, and our topic here discusses how it affects medical personnel. Well, the law of armed conflict dictates that you cannot harm medical personnel that are helping and treating wounded that are not participating in combat. So that means doctors that are in field tents and such, and that are not participating in combat. An interesting thing is that Lavoia Rain of Melbourne Law, actually, in her definition of the law of armed conflict, she thinks that these go pills that the doctors are administrating are causing the doctors to lose their protections under the law of armed conflict. The go pills help prevent sleep deprivation. They keep the soldier going. And her argument is that these people are helping the soldiers kill other people, which falls outside of their duties to protect and treat the wounded.
So basically what you're saying is that it seems as though there could be a possible loophole that countries could disagree on. Maybe one says that these go pills are bad and that they don't fall under the law of armed conflict, and they maybe harm a doctor that is administering these, which could cause even bigger fuel to the fire that could possibly even start a war, who knows. So in order to avoid stuff like this, what do you think the proper solution to these kind of problems is?
Well, I think that this loophole perfectly shows that we are not prepared. We are woefully unprepared to be modifying soldiers to the extent that some people say that we should. One of my sources actually said that we're not doing enough. We should keep modifying soldiers. We should make steroids mandatory, and we should just absolutely make our soldiers not even human anymore. He was saying that we should modify them to the extent that they're just killing machines, really. It was awful to read.
Yeah, it sounds very ethically unsound.
Yes. Also, I think that we should think unlike that man thought. He thought that we should just dive into this. I think we should be more thoughtful before we become so rash and dive into this topic of field. We need to study it more. We need to study what the effects of the human body, what we're doing to it, because some people are unsure of most chemicals that are in your fast food, all that stuff. We're unsure what these chemicals are even doing to our body in the long term. And we need to really start researching long-term effects before we can start improving our soldiers. And I think one way to study the long-term effects without violating people's consent is to allow them to volunteer for these things instead of making it mandatory.
All right. Well, thank you for all the information. I really didn't know much about this topic beforehand, and you've enlightened me quite a lot.
Well, yes, it was very nice having you on the podcast, DeVaughn. This is the Milk and Cookies podcast, signing off.
See you guys.
See you.